nameless place in a nameless year. A world without right angles or plane surfaces. This is its only geometric line, the horizon that closes it off from the rest of the world. Until at last, one southern summer's day, Europe and its hard, shining reason arrive. And the nameless year is 1788, and the nameless place begins to become Australia. This is where they came, the first 1,000 settlers, out of the east, out of the Pacific like the rising sun. This is where they landed. This is where geometry and steel and God and the rules of harmony came ashore. The European mind, in the person of 529 convicts, together with the troops to guard and flog them. Sydney Harbour. This is where our journey begins, where Australia began. And in the end, the sea took, and from the soil of Australia came forth straight lines and rational curves. Solids of the most intricate and sophisticated geometry. And there was one line drawn from here that in the end stretched right the way across Australia. From Sydney to Perth, the line goes, all the way across from the Pacific to the Indian Ocean on the other side, nearly 2,500 miles.
Are you absolutely sure you want to go?
You're not trying to put me off, are you, Russ?
No, but it's going to be very hot in places, you know. And you got your snake bite remedy, by the way?
You're not serious, they don't have snakes, though.
It took 120 years to build on and off, and this is the train that runs it, the Indian Pacific.
Well, you're all ready, I hope. You've got everything. What are you going to read a lot, or?
I thought I'd look out the window.
Out the window, yes. I suppose
Will that keep me going?
Yes.
This is Ross Campbell seeing me off, a friend of mine. We're both retired columnists.
We have a lot of clients.
So I got it.
And ticks, you know. We have a lot of ticks.
What do I do about the ticks?
Well, you want to put a little dab of vinegar onto the ticks. And
Hold on.
snakes. Cooking car 4, are you, sir? Tip Frayn.
That's right.
Worth 15 car 4.
Great.
Just like to follow me?
Thank you very much indeed.
Okay.
Come and have a look through the window.
Okay, yes. Ah, hello there. Terrific.
My own room, or rather my own roomette.
Lovely.
Folding bed, folding wash basin, folding lavatory. All human life is here.
You're not supposed to use that in the station.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Indian Pacific will depart at 3:15. Would all persons who are not travelling kindly be prepared to leave the train? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
I think this is double glazing, isn't it?
I can't hear you, Ross. It's double glazed.
What?
No, cool. It's air conditioned.
Oh, that's all right. It's been a pleasure.
Three days. when you can fly it in 4 hours. We must all be mad.
It's a dinosaur, this train. Stainless steel and air-conditioned it may be, but really it's a sport, a throwback to the days of the Orient Express and the great Cunardas. And it's not a nostalgic survival, it's a brand new train. It's only been running since 1970. At a time when the rest of the world was ripping up its railways, Australia was only just completing its first continuous transcontinental line. At some little cost. The last 7 years' work came to about £120 million. The first bit to be built in the 1850s went 10 miles up the harbour, and already it looked like a dinosaur to some. At the beginning of the 19th century, settlement clung to the narrow coastal plain. Australia stopped sharply 35 miles west of Sydney. This was what stopped it, the Blue Mountains. They're not very high, 1,000 metres or so, but for years this combination of thick bush and sheer rock face made them impenetrable. Escaped convicts disappeared up here in the belief that they were climbing through into China. These are the last hills we crossed for 2,500 miles. Stockbroker belt, I suppose, since the railway came through in the 1860s. But still densely forested with eucalyptus and dark ironbarks. Still alive with birds as brilliantly coloured as children's comics. The first of the immense barriers that the interior presents. Hard country for the railway engineer. We get down the sheer cliffs on the far side by way of a chain of tunnels blasted through the solid rock. But there was no money for that kind of tunnelling in the 1860s. So they brought the line down the cliff face in 3 tremendous swoops. The old trains would come down here, stop at the buffers, switch the points, and reverse out down the middle gradient. Railway enthusiasts have now restored the track on this bit, and they run their own train up and down it. A lot of them are professional railwaymen of diesels and electrics. A real busman's holiday. The Great Lithgow Zigzag, the earliest legend of Australian engineering. Zig in, zag back, and zig on again, where the modern line still runs. We're through the mountains now, and the west lies open before us. Rich lands we're entering here. The first gold in Australia. That's what brought the settlers. Then the gold ran out, and the prospectors turned to farming instead. Wheat, wool, fruit, vines. That's what brought the railway. They called it the Westward Thrust, and they were thinking of the westward thrust across America. Banjo Patterson, the man who wrote Waltzing Matilda, was born just down the line near Orange. He talked about the vision splendid of the sunlit plains extended. The vision splendid, and we're heading into the west after it. A straight golden line into the eye of the setting sun, over the horizon into pure conjecture.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The first sitting for dinner will now commence. Would all passengers who haven't allocated this sitting please proceed to the dining car? Would you please place your meal seating tickets on the table in front of you for inspection by the head waiter? Announcing the first sitting for dinner. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Great bit, sir?
Why did he decide to go by train this time instead of by plane?
We wanted to saw the desert and she wanted to see the...
We wanted to go across Nullarbor Plain because our second son, he drove over in 1973, wasn't it?
Yes.
Quite a drive.
He said he would never miss the experience.
Really?
Drove right across.
Also, you don't get a meal like this on the plane, do you?
No.
Golden sponge pudding. You never see golden sponge pudding on menus in England. You certainly never see it on menus in aircraft. It's my favourite pudding.
Is it?
Yeah. That's a real pudding, golden sponge. And you're staying in Perth at the other end?
Probably in Perth for about a week and we're flying back. Yes.
Flying back. Are you going all the way? Part of a tour?
Yeah.
When you get old, you don't mind doing other things.
No. You've never been to Australia before?
No, I've been the other way. Japan and China, Philippines and so
Really,
forth.
China? You must be severely jet lagged.
First time I've been on the train since 1949.
Where are you going in 49?
We went up to Foster. It was our honeymoon.
Excuse me.
A golden sponge. What? Golden sponge? It's real pudding.
That's sold.
This is the first-class club car. Very tasteful. Monday, left Sydney. Golden sponge pudding for dinner.
I tell you.
Thanks so much.
Look at it. The fertile plains didn't even last a night. Scrub, a little parched grass, The great brown waterless waste. Some sort of stream back there. 7:30. Must be Menindee. My God, that was the Darling, one of the biggest rivers in Australia. I see why the great Australian explorers all grew beards. One glance in the shaving mirror and you might have missed the only water for the next 100 miles. And heaven knows what's going by on the other side of the train while I'm stuck here with soap on my face.
Ladies and gentlemen, the second sitting for breakfast has now commenced. Last call for the second sitting for breakfast, thank you.
All over the road.
I see those kangaroos this morning. Hundreds and hundreds of them.
Oh, I didn't see that thing.
Sure, a big red one.
I saw an emu.
Did you?
Well, I knew, yeah.
Oh, I didn't see an emu.
Well, 2 beautiful eggs and a little bit of bacon.
Don't you wish you had some?
No, doesn't attract me at all, except the smell of it's so lovely.
Now watch that clump right there. We're past it and I didn't see that animal come out again. I wonder what that would have been.
A world of dust. What must it be like living out there? One of the people who does live out there is Ron Adams. He works out of Broken Hill for the New South Wales government, and he drives hundreds of miles in the bush every week.
The countryside here can be very, very hard, and I think it's a challenge. It's a challenge of you against the country. What we have noticed is some locals that have perished in this country, mainly because they feel they know the country so well and they take these little risks that everybody else is warned not to take. This is their downfall. The main thing out in this area is to carry water. If you've got water, you'll survive. If anything does happen, you stay with your vehicle. And, you know, we've never had any problems yet as far as the tourists or the travellers are concerned.
The ocean had been a terrible enough barrier for the early settlers to cross. 12,000 miles, half of them through the huge following seas of the Roaring Forties. But this ocean of land behind the mountains was even worse. In fact, it was impossible, even for a start, unthinkable.
Ron, would you stop somewhere?
Where, Michael?
Anywhere.
A blank, a nothing. For a long time it wasn't even Australia. Its only name was New South Wales. And New South Wales stretched back to an arbitrary line of longitude down the centre of the continent.
Hey, Michael!
An undrawn line across an unseen land. To the east of the line, nothingness. To the west, nameless nothingness. The Indian Pacific came through here this morning. Lake Menindee. I knew you could never see anything from trains.
water. It's like one of the huge mirages that haunted the old explorers as they staggered on from one dried-up creek to the next. They were obsessed by the hope of water. Water to drink and water to navigate. Because what they were looking for was the sea, the familiar, navigable sea, an inland sea on which they could sail across to the west.
This isn't an inland sea. It's a man-made lake created by diverting the waters of the River Darling. It was the Darling that raised the hopes of the early explorers. No outfall could be found on the coast. It could only be flowing inland. When Sturt came through Menindee on an expedition to the centre, he was hauling a boat. But what he found in the interior was not sea. It was a desert so dry that the screws fell out of the boxes and the leads fell out of the pencils. It was water that brought the railway back through all that dust to fetch water for Broken Hill in 1919. And water that brought the line on from Condobolin in 1927 to capture the wool traffic from the river steamers. There was already a line onwards from Broken Hill serving the mines, carrying first the silver, then the lead and zinc down to the smelters at Port Pirie. Bit by bit the line was drawn, backwards and forwards, and with a lot of rubbing out and redrawing. They had to rebuild the track down to Pirie to take the Indian Pacific. It was the wrong gauge. Well, we're out of New South Wales now. We're into South Australia. This is really another country coming out to meet us.
Because Australia, as it grew, didn't come overland like us. There was no railway, there was no road. Australia came round by sea and started out all over again on the coast.
Each new colony pushed out separately into the interior, under its own government and with its own ideas about building railways, among other things. This is Peterborough, our first stop in South Australia. And this is where the philosophies of Sydney and Adelaide finally come face to face. Our train runs on rails that are 4 foot 8.5 inches apart, the classic British standard gauge. It's said to be the distance between the wheels of a Roman chariot. This train, which is the connection to Adelaide, the South Australian capital, runs on rails 5 foot 3 inches apart, the Irish standard gauge, probably the length of Brian Boru's sword arm.
How long are we stopping here?
25 minutes.
All the old main lines of South Australia and Victoria were built on the Irish gauge. The only way a train can run direct from Sydney to Adelaide is by getting a completely new set of bogies in the works here.
How did they manage to start out English at one end of the line and end up Irish at the other? Well, it was like this. There was an Englishman, an Irishman, and a Scotsman. The Irishman was engineer for New South Wales, and he persuaded everyone to standardise on the Irish gauge, the mighty stride of Brian Boru. Then they cut his pay, and he resigned. The Scotsman, who succeeded him, persuaded New South Wales to go back to the original idea of standardising on the British gauge, Roman chariot wheels, but they didn't manage to inform the other colonies in time. Well, that was Australia, separate colonies, isolated by distance, trying to coordinate their efforts to the home government in London, 12,000 slow sea miles away. So much for the Scotsman and the Irishman. Where does the Englishman come into the story? Well, I think it was an Englishman who persuaded South Australia, later on in the 19th century, to adopt a third gauge, 3 foot 6, narrow gauge. Here it is running inside the standard track. Cheaper to build, of course. The line down from Broken Hill was all narrow gauge until they rebuilt it to take the Indian Pacific. This was an entirely narrow gauge junction.
Railways of Australia, says the sign. Because separate railways they remain. 3 different systems have had to get together to run this train. That's why we're waiting, because New South Wales have gone home and taken their loco with them. For the next 1,300 miles or so, until Western Australia comes out to play, we shall be hauled by the South Australians. Well, that's Australia. Still.
When you think about it, this smooth stainless steel train is like one of those bland joint communiques they put out at the end of some difficult and protracted negotiations. It's an enactment of national unity. And like most such documents, it's the product of many earlier drafts, many conflicting proposals and counter-proposals.
In fact, the original draft for a transcontinental railway wasn't even east to west. It was south to north. It was to connect South Australia with Asia and the rest of the world. Though this first manifesto on wheels was such an extraordinary tangle of compromises, such a confusion of grand ideals and local expediency, that it's difficult to follow where it thought it was going from 1 mile to the next. It set out from Port Augusta back here in 1878. It's going north, up to Darwin. The aim, said the governor of the colony when he cut the first sod, was to open up trade with India, China and Siam. Well, local steam enthusiasts have reconstructed this section of the old line, and it's not going north at all. It's going east.
We're making a slight diversion on the way to India to pick up copper from the mines in the Flinders Ranges. But in fact, it was so expensive building the railway through these hills that it turned up and went back without ever reaching the mines at all. Just as well, really, they all went bust.
The line staggered back to the plains to carry wheat from the great new wheatlands that were opening up around Farina. But by the time it got there was no wheat. The wheatlands had dried up. This is Quorn, where the restored steam line ends. Quorn was a railway town, the junction for passengers travelling through from Adelaide to the north. Now the trains for the north bypass all these early meanderings, and Quorn is left high and dry, its pub still waiting for the weary Maharajas and the thirsty spice traders. But there is still a train running north along the old line.
Close the pantry door, the other side there.
Okay. Righto, Tommy, that's it. Take it away.
This is Marie, 180 miles to the north, where the new straight standard gauge line from Port Augusta ends, and you change at midnight onto the old original narrow gauge track. It's the most famous old train in Australia, the GAN.
Morning, cup of tea for you.
All human life here too, but slightly more antique. What the GAN is famous for, though, is its speed. We left Marie at midnight last night, and we're due to reach Alice Springs in the centre of Australia at breakfast time tomorrow, a schedule which means maintaining a cracking 17 miles an hour. But circumstances often conspire to delay this ambitious timetable. The ground here is so dry that the track was laid direct upon it without ballast. Unfortunately, though, this is the floodplain of Lake Eyre, and when the waters do come, they wash the sand away from under the rails. Sometimes the wind blows the sand over the rails. Sometimes the train's been held up by plagues of grasshoppers or woodlice. Then it comes to a halt, sometimes for days, occasionally for months.
There's a story about a woman on this train who keeps asking the conductor what time they get to Alice Springs. Every time the train stops, she asks him. And the conductor begins to get a bit impatient. What's the hurry? He says, we'll get there sometime in the next few days. So the woman says, look, I'm due to have a baby. Well, says the conductor, you shouldn't have got on the train in this condition. And the woman says, when I got on the train, I wasn't in this condition.
And when you look at the track we're travelling over, you can't help wondering if 17 miles an hour isn't reckless bravado. The geometry seems to be melting and buckling slightly in the sun. Dry rot and white ants are disturbing the sleepers in their beds. On the rails go, though, on into the heart of Australia, staggering and weaving like two exhausted explorers, due north into the eye of the noonday sun. The Gan. An odd name. It's short for Afghan, because before there were cars and lorries in Central Australia, they used camels. They imported them originally for the building of the first overland telegraph line along the same route as the railway. They spread and multiplied. In fact, Australia now exports fine thoroughbred racing camels to the Arabs. The camels carried the rails and sleepers to build this railway. The Afghans were the camel drivers they imported to look after the beasts.
They were called Afghans, of course, because they came from, well, almost everywhere except Afghanistan.
The coaches are German for some reason. They look as if they were built for the Kaiser. And a slow, soothing, timeless world it is. More like an ocean cruise than a train.
They're doing 50. Right-hand wheels in the dirt, the left-hand wheels on what's left of the road, and just go like hell. Hope nothing's come over the hill, you've just gone over blind, you know. Just fly out. That's the times when we're really happy that we've drunk. All the way from Darwin to Melbourne by myself. No radio, no cassette player, no music, no nothing.
A cruise across an ocean of land. Nothing much to mark our passage, except a glittering wake of old beer cans. We're stopping again. Grasshoppers? Greenfly? No, Unadata. They let us off here for 20 minutes to stretch our legs and take photographs.
How old are you? 18. 18? She's 14.
Was she? Is she?
That's 15.
Have a look around here, love. And how come you're going? A blonde one. Eh? How did she come to be blonde? It's beautiful, aren't you? Is she a little girl?
Boy.
Boy. Boy. How does she have blonde hair? Is his father blonde? He had blonde hair? Why?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, well, that's how he has blonde hair. I was in Fiji. Do you know anything about the Fijians where they have dark curly hair? And I went along and one lady had hair as blonde as could be.
What brought the line here? There's no copper, there's no water. Well, it was unemployment mostly. It was something to keep people going in the depression of the 80s. We haven't lost hope yet, though. Straight on for China at 17 miles an hour. But the most characteristic readjustment of all in the line's northward trek to China is this. 2 days or so in from the coast, halfway across Australia, the line expires. Where am I? In Alice Springs. Well, it's somewhere at last. But it's an odd place to build a railway to. It's the middle of nowhere. But then, that's the point of Alice Springs. That's why the tourists come, to see what nowhere looks like. Alice Springs became somewhere for a very simple, but oddly circular reason. It was because the railway ends here. Before the line arrived in 1929, this area had a white population of about 40. And the railway ends here because, well, because if it wasn't going through to the north coast, and there was never any serious hope that it would, and if it was going to end in the middle of nowhere, and it was, then it had to end, well, somewhere. And this place was rather more somewhere than anywhere else, because there was a repeater station on the Overland Telegraph here, preserved now as a museum. And they built the repeater station here because in this dried up creek they found a water hole, a puddle of river around the base of this rock, left over in summer from the previous wet season. Now even the puddle's dried up. Only the water line on the rock remains. A dried up water hole. That's what we've been travelling towards for the last 800 miles. The middle of nowhere. And if you're going to be anywhere in nowhere, there's a certain appeal to being in the middle of it, which is almost exactly where Alice Springs is. In fact, the dead centre of Australia is north of Alice, but for tens of thousands of tourists every year, the hub of the continent is this strange, bald, bulging navel 260 miles to the southwest. Ayers Rock, after Sydney Harbour Bridge and the Opera House, the most famous object in Australia. I was flown out here by Erwin Glander, the chief reporter on the local newspaper. Journalists here hire planes like other reporters hire taxis.
Is there any danger that all those thousands and thousands of tourists could damage the landscape here?
Yes, I think there's a very real danger. It looks to be a very tough landscape, but it's not. It's extremely fragile. A good example is a place on the southern side of the rock, which is called Erosion Gully, and it's a creek bed which now is there, and it is there as a result of people simply walking over the ground. The impact of their feet has created a small depression in the surface, and the water during rain cascaded off the rock, followed this slight depression and washed it out. So now there's a creek bed maybe 2 meters wide and half a meter deep, which hasn't existed before, so the environment of the rock in this small place has been changed.
They gather for the moment of sunset.
Many climb it. All of them take photographs of it, I'm sure of that.
And they all stand in the same places?
More or less, yes.
They'll get shots just at the right moment.
Yes, they try to. Yeah, they try to. They take them when the coach driver says it's the right moment.
In 1844, we landed on the Liverpool shore. Me belly was empty, me hands were raw, from working on the railway, the railway. I'm weary of the railway, for Paddy works on the railway. I was wearing corduroy breeches, big and breeches, following switches, line breeches. I was working on the railway. 1845, when Dan O'Connelly was alive. Dan O'Connelly was alive and working on the railway.
The original transcontinental line running north out of Port Augusta died in the desert like an exhausted explorer. By this time, anyway, the new transcontinental line had long since struck out from Port Augusta westwards. It wasn't going to India, China or Siam. It wasn't going to pick up copper or silver or cattle. The Indian Pacific runs west from Port Augusta purely for political reasons, to tie Australia together. It was the inducement to Western Australia, remote and isolated, to enter the Federation. The vision splendid, here if nowhere else.
Morning, sir. Oh, how are you? Where are we? Just past Blue Lane.
This is where we come down onto the Nullarbor Plain. Nullarbor, no tree. The great treeless plain. 500 miles across, with no trees, no hills, no valleys, no rivers, no lakes, no towns, no villages. Low saltbush, parched infertile limestone soil. A dry ocean in a flat calm. Nothing, except the geometrical line of the railway itself. For 300 miles across the Nullarbor, it runs dead straight, the longest straight railway line in the world, a pure mathematical projection. It's going to be a long day. In fact, it's going to be an hour and a half longer than yesterday. We put our watches back at Cook. Longer still for the driver. Every 30 seconds he has to put the vigilance control back. If he lets the needle go over the 30-second mark into the red sector, bells ring and lights flash, and the emergency brakes go on.
How many times do you have to press that vigilance control in 7 hours?
Work it out yourself every 90 seconds.
That's, my God, that's...
You probably press it, say, 60 times an hour, so...
60 times out times 7, that's about 400 times.
Yeah, 400 times in a shift.
Do you ever fall asleep on this stretch?
Oh, no, we're not allowed to do that.
I see there are quite a lot of nests in the telegraph poles.
Yeah, the only sort of trees we've got around here for the crows to nest in.
I can't think what the birds did before they built the railway line.
They must have had trouble.
One passenger train a day, loaded with old age pensioners. And all built for our benefit. Funny to think that's what it's come down to. I suppose it's plain economics. It's cheaper to fly across Australia than to go first class by train, unless you're a pensioner. If you get the pensioners' concessionary rate, you can go all the way across first class for £100. A lot cheaper than flying economy. In fact, we're losing the railways £20 a head on the trip. Freight, this is what makes the money. We're really an irrelevance. Symbolic passengers on a political diagram.
Hi, you're the guard.
That's right, I am, yeah.
I've been listening to you on the intercom. You're a pom, aren't you?
That's right, from Skipton in Yorkshire.
Ah. Driver says you own a gold mine.
That's right, I do. A small one, about 95 kilometres northeast of Kalgoorlie.
Gold, a gleam of light from underground. It shaped Australia almost as much as the golden sun above. Gold and the hope of gold. Gold fever once raged right across this part of Western Australia. This is Broad Arrow, or it was, a town of 2,000 people with 8 hotels, 2 breweries and a stock exchange. Now there are prospectors out in the bush all around again. Some of them, like Dave McCarthy, the railway guard, just come out at the weekends. They watch each other like hawks. They note every new scratching at the earth.
There was a man and his fiancée that went out driving together. And when they came back, they fetched 2 or 3 bucketfuls of dirt. And in the dirt was somewhere like 150 ounces. It was 2 or 3 days before they were setting off on the honeymoon. They went to Melbourne, and the miner there caught pneumonia and died. And his new wife could never find the place again, and as far as I know, that place had never been found. I've been myself.
And here's Dave McCartan's empire, the Double M mine on the Black Cat claim.
Yeah, this is the kingdom, Campbell's kingdom.
Hello.
Hey.
Hi.
Right. How you going, Dave?
All right, Laurie, how's yourself? This is Laurie Morgan. He's my partner in this show.
Nice to meet you.
This is his wife, Betty.
Hello, nice to meet you.
And this is Carol, my wife.
Hello, how are you?
Michael Frayn.
Did you build this place, Dave?
Yes, Laurie and I built it.
What happened?
Oh, just any old tin. That's a cyanide drum, straightened out.
Are we going down the mine, Dave?
Yes, we'll go down about 10 or 20 minutes.
Well, they've changed, haven't they? It's be dirty down there.
Oh, I should do, yes, it will be dirty. Yeah.
What I don't understand is how you ever found the place.
We got this book, this one here, the list of council gold mining leases.
Yeah.
And we looked for a place which had a low tonnage and a high ounces.
Yeah.
And as we looked through it, we came across this one, the Black Cat, which has 30 tons for 245 ounces.
That's very high indeed, isn't it?
That's very high. That's rich, yeah.
I see that was 1937 he did that.
That's right, yeah.
Why did he pack it in? Why didn't he go and work in it?
Oh, I should think when he found that he wouldn't want to work anymore.
Oh, railway sleepers, aren't they?
That's right, bottom of the Commonwealth Railway.
Can't get away from the railways, can you?
Yeah.
No snakes down there, are there, Dave?
Yeah, there's a couple of redbacks down there.
Redbacks, what are they?
They're spiders, and they'll hurt you if they bite. And if they do bite, don't you fall, because I'm going to be below you, and it's a long way down.
How deep is this thing, Dave?
About 35 foot from the top.
You seen those spiders yet?
Yeah, they're just to your left as you come down the ladder. Black widows is another name for them.
You're joking?
No, I'm not. That's what they call them in Africa. They're right, you know. I used to be an ambulance driver. Well, these are hematite leaders. They're running back along this way and then coming out and down into this bigger leader here. This is carrying somewhere near 1/2 ounce of gold. And it should meet up with a hematite leader, which is running down the inside of the wall. You can't see it here, but we can take it down. We do know it's there, and we can take it down, and they should meet together. We may have to go in 20, 30 foot. But still, when they meet together, it'll be quite well worth it. They should make a rich pocket somewhere in there.
Gold set the final seal on the Commonwealth of Australia. It was the goldfields that brought the line these last 400 miles between Kalgoorlie and Perth. It was the gold miners who voted Western Australia into the Federation. Nearly there.
Good morning, sir. Here's your cup of tea. We arrive in Perth at 7 o'clock.
Another Australia altogether, reaching back from another sea. A mirror image on the other side of the great emptiness. A humanized landscape once more, clinging on to the other edge of the continent. With vineyards, comfortable outer suburbs, commuters with offices to go to, and trains with small aspirations to get them there. Even the muddle of industry looks reassuring after the Nullarbor. The human race is in control again, if only around the edges. Feels like home. It also feels as if it might just suddenly disappear again and leave nothing but dust and scrub. Hi, it's me. I've arrived, I think. "2,400 miles down the track, and a city as rich and towered as Sydney at the end of it. All this wealth is new. It's minerals, huge deposits of iron ore above all. It's so rich here now that there's even talk of seceding again. Another shining new city, but only after such a huge and ancient emptiness. Another shining silver river, but only after such a vast breadth of unwatered dust. Another ocean. The Indian Pacific. It's a good name. One straight human line from the sunrise to the sunset. One straight scratch through the dust, marking it for rational man. And all the rest of it, much the way it was when those first settlers, with their geometry and their shackles, came round the bend of the world.